everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns and welcome to video 3 for the Balm Wax Canvas Backpack. In this video we're going to complete the exterior assembly of our bag. You're going to need, on top of what we've sewn so far for the exterior, you're going to need the bottom exterior piece, the top band exterior pieces, and your flap pieces. So you're going to need the exterior and the back piece. So the front piece and the back piece, which are two exterior pieces, but one of them is my focal print, and then the other one is my waterproof canvas. And then you're also going to need the flap buckle strap piece, and you're going to need half of your buckle. So I'm going to unwrap this. It's really well wrapped in plastic. And I like to keep part of it wrapped in the plastic just to protect it from scratches. So what I need actually is the top portion, so the female part of the lock. It's very well wrapped. And I cannot seem to get this off. It is really very well wrapped. There, I got it. So this is going to go in on the bottom buckle strap at the very end. And this is the part that we're going to attach to the flap. So I'm just going to recover it to protect it. Okay, so I'm going to cut away this part of the plastic because I need to have this ring part exposed so that I can attach my flap buckle strap to it. So before we start, I'm just going to set this aside for a minute. And you're going to take the front fabric of your flap and you're going to, so this has Decaville light on the wrong side, you're going to fold this in half, and I just want to mark the center on the bottom here on the right side to make sure that I'm installing my buckle properly at the center. And then you're going to take the flap buckle strap and you're going to pass it through the ring of the buckle. And then I'm just quickly going to baste the raw ends of the strap together. Okay, so now that they're basted together, so I'm just going to place them like this with the strap centered on that, over that center mark that I just made. And I'm leaving 1/2 inch of my my strap piece sticking out the end, the edge of the flap. And then I'm going to baste this in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance at the bottom edge of the flap here. Okay, once your flap buckle strap is basted to the front of the flap here, you're going to place your second piece of flap fabric and place them right sides together. And then I'm using clips because you can't use pins with any kind of canvas, not waterproof, not wax canvas. It's better to use clips instead of pins. And then I'm going to sew them together. I'm going to start at one of the top corners, backstitch. Then I'm going to sew all the way down here, stop and rotate, sew across here, stop and rotate, and then sew up to the other corner and make sure that I backstitch again. Okay, so now that the flat pieces are sewn together, we're going to trim the seam allowance. Now, if you're using wax canvas, it does fray quite a lot, so you're not going to want to trim that seam allowance too much. The waterproof canvas doesn't fray at all, so I don't have to worry as much. I do not trim where I have my strap because if I make it too short, I'm worried that it'll come out of the seam. So I'm going to leave it at the length that it is. So obviously, I'm going to turn my flap right side out, and you cannot press the waterproof canvas, but I'm going to press from the fabric side. So I just turn it right side out. It's a little bit difficult because the wax canvas is very stiff, and so is the Decaville. So it's also very difficult to push out the corners. So I'm going to get my ironing board and my iron, and we're going to press this. So before I press it, I'm trying to roll the seam so that I don't have any wax canvas on the top, because I don't want to accidentally press that waterproof canvas. And then I'm going to go over to the machine, and I'm just going to top stitch the seam allowance along all these edges. Okay, so you're going to take your flap and you're going to place it centered over the top edge of the main panel contrast. It should be covering your handle and your backpack straps completely. And then I'm just going to sew it in place along the top edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now the flap is attached to the bag. We're just going to set this aside for a minute, and you're going to need your top and exterior pieces. So you'll remember we made the marks for the location of the grommets. So I have, my marks are more to the outside here of the pieces. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 marks. what I'm going to do is the ends, the shorter ends here that don't have marks, I'm going to attach them together. So I'm going to sew them together, and then I'm going to open the seam allowance and top stitch on either side of the seam. So now we're going to attach our drawstring. So you're going to attach it at the center, so fold it in half, and then find that center point, and you're going to place it here in the middle, and then you're just going to sew it in place. So I sew back and forth several times just to make sure that it's very secure. Okay, so the drawstring cord is now secured to the top band pieces. I don't want the drawstring cords to be in the way, so just going to tie them in a loose loop like this, and just going to clip them to the top edge here. Then I'm going to take the opposite ends of the top band pieces, and now I'm going to do the same as I did for these ends, and I'm just going to sew them together, open up that seam allowance, and then top stitch on either side of the seam. So our top band is now in a loop, and we're now going to attach the bottom and the top band pieces to the exterior of our bag. But before we can do that, we need to find all of our center marks. So to find the center marks in the middle of these zipper pocket panels, I just line up these side seams and then flatten it and make a mark. And then you can do the same for the bottom edge as well. So on the bottom, I want the mark to be on the wrong side. And then I'm going to do the same for the other side. Then we're going to mark the center of the main panel on the front. So I want top mark on the right side. And then I already marked the center of my main panel when I attached my bottom buckle strap. So I'm just going to transfer that same mark to the wrong side. And then I have to do the same thing for the back panel, which is a little bit more difficult because it is very sturdy. It has some firm interfacing. So what I'm going to do is just use the bottom mark on the front and transfer that to the back. And I want to do that on the wrong side. For whatever reason, my white pencil is absolutely terrible. Okay, and then I'm doing the same for the top edge. Mark that on the front here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, now I believe in the pattern that I have you attach the top band instead of the bottom. but I think we're going to attach the bottom first. It doesn't really matter. So these are center marks right here, and I'm going to turn it right side out because I need to mark the center marks on this one as well. But I want them on the wrong side. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then my bottom is easy. I'm going to use the pattern piece to mark my center marks. And then I'm using that center dotted line to mark the centers on the straight edges. Okay, so, well actually we will start by attaching the bottom band. So the seam where I have the drawstring attached, that's going to be at the back. So that's going to be where the flap is located. And I flipped that the wrong way. And you want to attach these right sides together. So you start by lining up the 4 center marks, and then you can clip everything else in between. So now I'm going to sew these together along the top edge, making sure to backstitch. And then if your machine is capable, you can flip this like this and then top stitch that seam allowance. I have to say that now that this is my first time using waterproof canvas for the exterior of a bag, and I much prefer wax canvas. It's a lot easier to work with. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and top stitch that seam allowance all the way around. Okay, so now the top band is attached. The last thing we have to do is attach our bottom, the bottom exterior, the bottom contrast rather, to the bottom of the bag. So to do that, I have to turn the bag so that it is wrong side facing out. And I'm going to make sure that my flap buckle doesn't get in the way in this step. Okay, so I have to attach the bottom contrast to the bottom edge here. So you're going to start by clipping all of those center marks together. And then once you have the center marks clipped, you clip everything else in between. Okay, so now I'm going to go and sew the bottom to the bottom of the bag. And I like to sew this seam twice because there's all the weight of the bag is on this seam, so it's a pretty important seam. I'll sew once all the way around, making sure to back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then also a second line of stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from the first seam. Okay, so the bottom is sewn on. Now I'm going to trim my seam allowance. If you've used wax canvas for the exterior, I recommend not trimming your seam allowance at all if you can help it. And if you do want to trim it, trim very little off because wax canvas frays very easily. I also do not trim where I have my straps. I don't want them to be too short in the seam. It's better if there's more of the strap coming out the outside of the seam. Since I'm using waterproof canvas, I can go ahead and trim because it does not fray. Again, the bottom buckle strap I'm not trimming. And then I'm going to turn my bag right side out. Okay, so I like to finger press that seam allowance. Okay, and push it all out like this. There we go. Okay, so the exterior of our bag is nearly complete. We're going to be obviously attaching the other part of our buckle at the very end in the last video, and as well as installing our grommets. But this is the exterior of our bag. So in the next video, we're going to be sewing the lining of our bag.